Hello guys and welcome back to FatbossTV. Today we're covering the final boss in Uldir, which is G'huun.
Yes, this massive slug has 3 phases, and whilst testing we were only able to see 2 of them. We held back making this video as we was expecting more testing to be done, perhaps even just a normal mode test, but it doesn't appear that's on the horizon anytime soon. Now this, of course, is footage from the BFA beta, meaning that the boss could change before hitting live servers, and chances are that it will in some small way. The damage, especially in phase 2, felt super overtuned and it did prevent us from getting much further into the fight. We will, however, discuss the last phase and give you our thoughts on how it will play out later in the video, as well as our feedback. With all that out of the way, let's talk about the encounter.
So the fight space consists of this large arena area where primarily you'll be dealing with ads during phase 1 and the boss from phase 2 onwards. In the bottom left and right hand side of the room, however, there are ramps that will grant you access to paths that head towards a structure at the top of the room. The boss hides within this structure during phase 1 and is only released once the raid has deposited 3 power matrices into it. The power matrix originally spawns on the left hand side and will alternate with the right. When you pick it up, you'll become gradually slowed to the point where you're rooted. You can use your extra action button to throw it to a new player. If they do not catch it by standing in the landing zone, it'll instead despawn and you'll have to wait for a new one to spawn. This is really bad. It's important that you get 3 of these into the structure at the top of the path as soon as possible to trigger phase 2. Now when you pick up the matrix, it will also apply a debuff that prevents you from picking it up again for 5 minutes. However, it doesn't prevent you from catching it. So for the first player to initially pick it up has to be different each time. However, the people helping move it down the path and eventually depositing it can be the same every single time. Now as the slow applied by the power matrix stacks very quickly and cannot be removed or negated until you've thrown it, you'll need a couple of guys along the path so you can fire it towards each other to safely deposit it. We used mages at first using double blinks and that worked kinda well, however they're not the best by any means. Warriors using Warlock Gateway, double charge and leap could solo the entire path and deposit it before even being rooted. Monks could do the exact same thing with Chi Torpedo and Transcendence, again with a gateway, and Demon Hunters could also do the job using leaps and dashes. We found that having a single player do the job is definitely a better option than a group of players doing it, and it will definitely be a massive factor in compositions, especially for Mythic. The main reason being, on Mythic, both sides need to be done at the exact same time and also be deposited within a small time frame of each other. Now as you've probably noticed, these paths are coated in Sys. They slow and deal damage to any players within their animation. The slow can be countered by using effects like Blessing of Freedom, however dealing damage to these Sys will also reduce the ground effect size, allowing people to get through without being slowed at all. However, if you are a warrior, a monk or a demon hunter, these Sys become pretty much irrelevant. Whilst up on this platform you do take unavoidable ticking damage, it doesn't deal too much damage, but it just reinforces the idea of getting it done as soon as possible. But that's it for the platforms. Drop the matrix into the top of the path 3 times and phase 2 will start. We do, however, need to cover what's going on down in the arena below.
So the boss in this phase is just chilling close to where the matrices are being deposited. During this time he'll constantly heal himself, so it's absolutely pointless damaging him. To watch out for is his explosive corruption. The boss will apply this debuff pretty frequently to a random player, and when this debuff times out 5 seconds later, that player will leave a patch on the ground and fire orbs in all directions. If a player stands in the patch or is hit by one of these orbs, they'll then get the explosive corruption. So if the first guy to get the explosive corruption drops it in the middle of the raid, it's going to get bad fast, with half of your raid suddenly getting the debuff and spawning patches and orbs themselves 5 seconds later. We just found it's best to get the explosive corruption debuff as far away from the raid as possible, ideally against a wall, just to give as much reaction time as possible for people to dodge the orbs. Now aside from the debuff, the boss will be spawning 3 different types of ads. Blight Spreader Tendrils spam cast Decaying Eruption. This interruptible cast deals a nasty burst of damage to the raid. Once the tendrils run out of energy, they'll burrow to another location in the room. We typically just interrupted these guys and nuked them down first. Cyclopean Terrors cast an interruptible Mind Flay. This deals damage over 15 seconds to a random player and it can get pretty nasty. We did our best to keep these guys interrupted and simply cleave them down. And as for the last ad, this is the Dark Young. These guys need to be tanked as they have a large physical damage hit, but also importantly, they have to be positioned correctly because of the Dark Bargain. This ability is cast every time the Dark Young reach 100% energy. It will buff all mobs and players within the circle around them, with increased healing and damage done by 25% for 30 seconds, and it also increases the damage you take by 25%. By placing the Dark Young on top of Blight Spreader Tendrils, it simply allows the DPS to kill them off much quicker as they'll be taking additional damage. We even deliberately saved the Dark Young so that the buff could be reused on new sets of tendrils, as we valued this buff so highly. You do, however, need to be careful, because if you go for another stack of the debuff when Dark Bargain is cast, you will become mind controlled and the raid will have to kill you off. So you can only have one stack of Dark Bargain at any given time. But that's it for phase 1, you just need to keep on top of the ads, interrupt all their casts, make use of the Dark Bargain. Meanwhile, the guys on the upper platforms need to deposit 3 of the power matrices into the re-origination drive. Once that's done, a re-origination blast will happen. This deals huge damage to all mobs and players every 5 seconds for 25 seconds, and this will also stun and apply a 100% damage taken increase to all of the mobs, including the boss when he's active. It's at this point that you want to stack up, use some healing cooldowns to counteract the damage, and begin to kill off any remaining mobs, although the damage from the blast itself should finish them off pretty quickly.
G'huun will then reveal himself, and it's at this point where it kind of fell to pieces. The boss absolutely destroys the tanks with Corrupting Bite. This is a stacking buff that increases the damage on his melee attacks, and it only resets when a new tank taunts. While testing, we found if this buff was to go above 5 stacks, the tanks would get absolutely destroyed without cooldowns. We even used 3 tanks to try and keep the stack as low as possible, as well as resorting to kiting the boss when cooldowns were spent. Just keep in mind, it's extremely unlikely you'll need to do this on live servers, but at what stack you'll need to taunt, we simply don't know right now. A solid guess would probably be anywhere between 4 and 6 stacks. To add to the extreme damage the tanks are gaining from the bite is also the Wave of Corruption. This wave is sent directly from the boss all across the room. It deals moderate damage that splashes 5 yards from every single player, so everyone must remain spread to prevent people from getting comboed. Additionally, it will also apply a dot, and this dot stacks. After the wave has been sent out twice, a random player in your raid will be hit by Blood Feast. This is a 10-second debuff that roots the target. Before the debuff times out, a third wave will go across the room. It's at this point after the third wave, everyone will then want to go and stack on the rooted player. When the debuff times out, everyone within the targeting circle will have their dot removed. However, an ad will now spawn in that location that has 5% damage and health increase for each player that stood within the circle to remove their debuff. This ad is a complete pain as it constantly deals raid-wide damage as well as interrupting people for 3 seconds each time he casts mind-numbing chatter. You gotta nuke this guy down as fast as you possibly can. And whilst all of this is still going on, you'll still have explosive corruption to deal with. Aside from that, you'll also need people running the power matrix orbs. We believe that the idea is that when the ad spawns from the Blood Feast, you should be looking at having your third power matrix deposited very soon so you can trigger a blast immediately so that the ad and the boss, which are now stunned for 25 seconds, can just be stunned as you stack and use healing cooldowns. We didn't get to see that, but looking at timers, it should line up that way if you're fast on the platforms. And you rinse and repeat that until you get the boss to around 25% health, and that's when phase 3 begins.
So looking at the dungeon journal, this does seem to be a burn phase. The re-origination drives will no longer be active, so you don't need to do the platforms anymore. And then the ceiling will begin to collapse, creating large circles that deal massive fall-off damage, so you just probably want to run away from those. Additionally, malignant growths will spawn around the room, dealing seemingly lethal damage to anyone within 8 yards. We assume this will just be a bunch of basically bad zones. Move out of those bad zones, otherwise you're going to die. The raid also needs to turn away from the boss in a Yogg-Saron style fashion when Gaze of G'huun is cast, otherwise you are going to be feared for 6 seconds. Aside from that, the boss will continue to destroy the tanks with Corrupting Bite, and the raid will continue to need to move away with the Explosive Corruption debuffs. Worst of all is that the Wave of Corruption still exists, but the ability to drop your stacks via Blood Feast doesn't anymore, hence why it's a burn phase. You've got to kill the boss before the putrid blood dot stacks from the wave become unhealable. And that's it. What a fight.
Yeah, so let's talk feedback. I think it's a great boss. I think we both agree on that. It's just a massive shame that it was so overtuned that we didn't get an opportunity to actually see those phase 3 mechanics. I think the running of the power matrix in phase 1 and phase 2 is an awesome idea, but it does definitely cater to some classes over others, and it might be an issue for some guilds that don't have the ability to, bring all these particularly good classes for it. And that's going to be more prevalent on Mythic, where both sides, of course, need to be done simultaneously.
I'm not looking forward to that.
Yeah, as for the whole 5-minute debuff you get, it, of course, encourages a rotation so everyone does the job. But it's a bit odd that someone can have the debuff but still catch the orb.
Yeah.
So you can use the same person every single time, but simply have a new person each time pick up the orb and throw it to that designated person to go and run it down to the drive in the middle. Also, the fact that that's even possible isn't clear at all.
We had no idea.
Yeah, it was only after reviewing the footage that we realized that actually happened at one point. And also we spoke to a couple of friends and they were like, oh yeah, we were doing that all the time.
Yeah, well, we had a whole group of people on the left-hand side. So 3 people on the left-hand side did the first set, set, then another set of people did it on the right side, and then a new set of people did it on the left, so that's already 9 people involved.
Yep.
When really you could just have one warrior on one side, one monk on the other, and then just send a unique person each time to throw the orb and get it going.
Yeah.
So that might actually be a better way of doing it, though, just because of smaller raid sizes. If you do have a smaller raid size, say you only have 10 people, and you need at least 2 people per orb, then someone's going to have to do it twice, because otherwise you're not going to have enough of these drives to go through, because it looks like you're going to probably want to use it 2 or 3 times at least during phase 2. So yeah, you don't want to send the tanks up there either, because the tanks are doing stuff downstairs. But they could definitely improve like how that's portrayed to people. Like, we had no idea. I've been reading the dungeon journal since it came out, and I kind of get a gist of how mechanics work from it. That tooltip's awful. It really doesn't. Like, you can't interact the power matrix.
But ultimately, it could also be a bug.
It could be a bug as well.
The way we were doing it is actually intended. We don't know. But moving on to just talking about phase 1, I think the pacing of the ads was pretty good. I think they actually got that right. There was a small moment right at the start where you get your very first Dark Young, and you can just kill him off, and then you have to wait like 5 seconds before ads spawn. But then we realized it's actually better to leave that Dark Young alive so you can reuse his Dark Bargain as soon as the next set of ads spawn. You can instantly make it so they take 25% more damage. So that was kind of cool. But apart from that, I think the pacing of the ad spawning was actually pretty good. Of course, phase 2 was overtuned as hell.
Yeah, nuts overtuning. I have no idea why it even got to testing in that sort of state. It was a bit embarrassing, actually, going there.
But potentially, although extremely unlikely, it might not be overtuned.
Oh, yeah, well, this whole hide upstairs strat.
Yeah, so we did have the idea of putting the entire raid minus the tanks and the majority of the healers to actually stay up on the upper platforms during phase 2, which means the boss is taking absolutely no damage at all. And then that entire group of people can just run the power matrices, and once they've done 3, they can then drop down because the boss is stunned and not doing any abilities, and you can just nuke him.
Yeah, because while you're upstairs, you don't get hit by the wave.
No, the wave doesn't hit you upstairs.
They'll have to hotfix that. There's no way that's intentional, because there are going to be guilds that have everyone up there, and they have a really good timer for the wave, and you literally just lost it each time the wave comes in, and then quickly run back down. And that just means don't bring melee to the fight. Those sort of things on Mythic are going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the damage was
I mean, in theory, that strategy does work.
Yeah.
But, I mean, even if you was to go with like a perfect comp, it's still going to make the enrage on the fight, if that is the intended strat, like 30 minutes long. It's going to take so long to kill the boss. So I don't think that that's going to be a likely case. Also, to add to that sort of strategy, there are waves in phase 3, and by the sounds of it, you don't actually have access to the paths at the top, so you are going to get hit by the waves.
Yeah.
So unless the waves in phase 3, they decide to make them do far less damage or come in far less frequently,
yeah, no, that's
I don't think that's going to be the intended strategy during phase 2. And also, we should probably mention, which we haven't mentioned yet, the boss's model.
It's so good.
It looks like me when I've just got out of the shower.
Oh, that's disgusting. Oh, nice one.
It's like the first wormy, slug-looking dude we've had since AQ40, which is pretty cool.
No, he's a very cool-looking boss. It's actually pretty terrifying tanking him, because he's just so big. And generally, the whole room, like, kind of, it's very well, it does feel like you're in this slimy sort of cave, and you've got all the cysts upstairs. And yeah, it's just a generally really nice-looking end room. A little bit dark, I guess, is the only complaint. But there you go, just turn with brightness, and it's an awesome place.
It's not as bad as fucking Xavier's.
Oh, God.
But aside from that, it's kind of difficult to comment further on the encounter, really, until we sort of see a more polished and well-tuned version.
Yeah.
Which we hope they do before BFA is released in August.
We can only hope. Either way, guys, that's where we're going to leave it today. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this preview, then do throw a like on it. It helps us out a lot. And of course, a huge thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. If you want to join this awesome group of people that you see on screen now, then do go and check out our Patreon page. A link for that is in the description below. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.
See you in the next one.